Let's talk about a book we all think we know, The Art of War. For most of us, it's the ultimate playbook for crushing your competition, you know? A manual for ruthless victory that generals and Wall Street types absolutely love. But what if that entire popular image is completely wrong?
I know, that sounds totally backward, doesn't it? But the deeper you actually go into the text, the more you see that its real philosophy is way more subtle and honestly way more powerful. It's not a guide to fighting, it's a guide to creating a situation where you never have to fight in the first place.
And look, this isn't some idea buried in an obscure footnote. This way of thinking, which is deeply rooted in Taoist philosophy, is right there at the heart of the book. It basically says that conflict is a sign of failure. It's a last resort, a tool of misfortune you only pick up when everything else has gone wrong.
So you have to wonder, right? How on earth did we get it so twisted? How did a book about avoiding conflict become the go-to symbol for total, relentless aggression?
I mean, you know the image I'm talking about. We all picture that corporate warrior with Sun Tzu on their desk, plotting some kind of hostile takeover. Or maybe a politician using these tactics to just dismantle an opponent. The name itself has become a synonym for a merciless, win-at-all-costs strategy.
And to be fair, you can see where that interpretation comes from. The book was born out of a period of absolutely brutal, constant warfare in China, and its principles were eventually used to end all that chaos by forging the very first imperial dynasty. So yeah, its first major application was, in a way, victory through a very bloody, total war.
But here's where we get the first real twist. A minister is asked why a certain kingdom was destroyed, and his answer is, because of its repeated victories. The Lord he's talking to is totally baffled, just like we would be. Wait, isn't winning the whole point?
And this just nails the core paradox of the entire book. Every single victory has a cost. It drains your resources, your energy, your people. If you win too many fights, you end up arrogant, exhausted, and in charge of a nation that's been hollowed out. The very thing you think of as ultimate success, winning, can be the exact thing that leads to your ruin.
So, if even winning can destroy you, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to what is probably the most profound and definitely the most misunderstood idea in the whole book.
There's this great old story that explains it perfectly. A lord asks his family of healers which one is the most skilled. The one who's famous, the one everyone knows. He says his skill is in big, traumatic stuff, operating, prescribing potions, dealing with the disease once it's a full-blown crisis. But he says his older brothers are way better. One of them can cure a sickness when it's just a tiny, barely noticeable thing. But the true master, the genius of the family, he deals with the spirit of the sickness and removes it before it even takes shape. His work is so subtle that no one outside the house even knows his name, because his patients never even get sick.
And that right there is Sun Tzu's entire philosophy. See, a good general wins battles. A great general wins the war. But the master strategist, they make the battle completely unnecessary. They win before a single sword is drawn, by shaping the battlefield, the political, the psychological battlefield, so that the opponent simply has no good options left. Conflict becomes pointless.
Okay, so to get to that level of mastery, you need a certain kind of ruthlessness. But it is not the kind of cruelty or aggression that we usually associate with that word. It's something much colder and a lot more personal.
Whoa, okay. That sounds awful, right? Like people are just disposable objects to be used and thrown away. But this is a metaphor from Taoist philosophy. It's not about being cruel to people. It's about seeing the world with complete detachment, without emotional bias, the same way nature operates.
And here is the absolute key. This ruthless objectivity isn't something you point outward at your enemy. It's a lens you turn inward. It has to include you in its assessment, your own weaknesses, your own biases, your own ego. It's about being brutally, unflinchingly honest with yourself, first and foremost.
And what's amazing is, when you start to apply that level of objectivity, you realize something profound. Conflict is never really about armies or weapons or terrain. At its core, it is always about human psychology.
So let me tell you this story about a general named Wu Qi. He was a true master of these principles. And one day, one of his soldiers had this awful, festering wound. It was getting badly infected.
So what does the general do? He gets down on his knees and he personally sucks the poison out of the wound. I mean, it's just this incredible act of care, an act that creates this unbreakable bond between a leader and his man. Now, you would expect the soldier's mother to be just overjoyed, right? So grateful for this general's incredible kindness. But when she hears what happened, she just breaks down and starts to weep uncontrollably. And the reason why is deeply unsettling.
She says, "The general did the exact same thing for my husband last year, and my husband fought with such loyalty that he never once retreated, and he died for that man." She knew this act of leadership wasn't just kindness. It was the forging of a psychological bond so powerful that her son would now fight to the death without a second thought. She was mourning a son who, to her, was already gone.
So these are really powerful, even uncomfortable ideas. What do they actually mean for us in our own lives, in the smaller conflicts we face every single day? Well, the book is really about upgrading your inner monologue.
It's about installing new questions in your head. So instead of, how can I win this argument? You start asking, is this a so-called victory that's actually going to leave me weaker in the long run? Instead of thinking, oh, they'd never do that, you ask, am I counting on my own strength, or am I just gambling that they won't attack? It forces a total shift in perspective, away from reaction and toward prevention, away from winning fights and toward making them totally irrelevant.
And at the end of the day, that's the real challenge of the art of war. It's not about learning how to be ruthless toward other people. It's about whether you can find the courage to be unflinchingly, brutally objective about yourself. And that, it turns out, is the hardest battle there is.